Hi, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I'm the author of The Snowball System, and I and my teams have trained over 15,000 high-end experts all over the world on sound, efficient, and authentic business development techniques. I'm joined in this episode by Marissa King. She is just a gem of a person. I had a ball recording this interview. Her book, Social Chemistry, is awesome. And it just so aligns well with the Snowball System and our Grow Big training. It's perfect match because it's 100% aligned. We actually cite a lot of the same studies and things like that, but it's also very different in that this is a really, really deep dive on relationship building and how do you build your network in a way that where you can be the most helpful and also be the most helped. We touch on that in chapter 4 of the Snowball System for sure, and talk a lot about giving first and helpfulness and finding uncommon commonality and being proactive and intentional and all those kind of things. But where that chapter might be 5,000 words or something like that, Social Chemistry, my guess is it's close to 100,000 words. So it goes really deep on this topic of network building and building a very robust and helpful network. So it was just a joy to tape this particular episode. And in this one, I asked Marissa very specifically, how can we use network building? All the content that's in her book, Social Chemistry. How can we build network? How can we take network building and use it in a way that helps us very specifically grow our book of business, deepen relationships with the right people, and also use those things to grow our career over time? A lot of times our networks can just sort of feel like they happen haphazardly, and Marissa's science and steps can help us be very intentional about how we build the right network that's going to be helpful for us and helpful for others. So that's our question. I'm going to ask her in a second. And hey, if you want our top thinking on how to have the right mindset to do the things that we talk about, grow your book of business, grow your relationships and your network, and grow your career, then head over to growbigplaybook.com. That's growbigplaybook.com. There's an instant download you're going to get with the 8 beliefs you need to have hardwired in your head to do those kind of things. And then you'll be signed up for our email list after that to give you little bite-sized, little 3 and 4 minute reads that help you keep the momentum going after that. So growbigplaybook.com is where you get that. So head over to that. So let's get into it. Here is Marissa King. Hey everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I am thrilled to have Marissa King join us, author of Social Chemistry. And you've already heard all about her, but why I'm so interested in talking to you, Marissa, and having our audience hear what's in your big brain is our audience so often says, I hate networking. Oh my gosh, I hate it. I hate meeting new people. You know, our audience is consultants and lawyers and accountants and account managers at big healthcare companies. They've spent a decade or 2 or 3 building their expertise, and they like to help people, but they don't necessarily like meeting new people. That's not, a lot of times we hear, I didn't join this business to meet people or to sell or something like that. Your book gives them the system. So tell us about how our audience can grow their book of business, can grow their relationships, can in doing that grow their career through networking. And I'm particularly interested in the 3 models you've got. And I don't know, just go. Tell our audience everything in your big brain.
Well, your audience is not alone if they have this natural resistance to the idea of thinking about networking. We know from research coming out of NCI that close to 2/3 of professionals, even professionals whose business depends on relationships, are really actively resistant or reluctant to the idea of thinking about networking. And this makes perfect sense. Our relationships are in many ways the thing that we hold most dear and sacred. So the idea of being intentional or strategic about them is morally off-putting for many. In fact, there's a lovely experiment that when they ask people just simply to think about the idea of networking, so going out to, let's say, a professional event with the idea that you're going to get something, you're going to meet a new business lead, you're going to try to get a job lead, when people were just simply asked to recall that idea versus thinking about something much more neutral, like, so I went to a business event and I bumped in spontaneously to you, Mo, and we came up with a new idea. The people who are asked to think about this idea of networking, professional networking in particular, and when they filled out a word completion task, so imagine you see the words W blank SH. People who thought about this idea of instrumental professional networking were twice as likely to think of a word like wash rather than a really neutral word like wish. They also preferred cleansing products over more neutral products like Post-it notes. And what this is really capturing is a very deep moral and psychological aversion to the idea of thinking strategically about relationships. And whether you experience that, if you don't, that's great, but likely that people you are interacting with do. So it's important to keep in mind. And what we know is that networking is certainly important. And one of the best ways to overcome that is actually to think about what can you give in an interaction instead of what can you get. But beyond simply just meeting new people, which is certainly important, a lot of what I try to do in my work is show that it's not just networking that matters, it's actually networks. And by starting to understand what your network looks like and what its current strengths are, it's going to be a far more effective approach than focusing on just simply the number of people you know.
Marissa, that's exactly it. And you sound like you're us teaching professionals business development. Help first, be proactive, expect nothing in return, but do these in a way that, hang out in circles that you think will actually grow your book of business and deepen the right relationship, things like that. There's an intentionality to it, but at the same time, you're always focused on being helpful first as opposed to seeing what you can get. So go deeper. One of the things that I really liked about social chemistry was the research in it. We've got a ton of research in the snowball system, and over 150 studies are in all of our trainings and backing up all that we do. So I particularly like books that are deeply steeped in research. And I really like frameworks. Our audience does too. So tell our audience about the three main frameworks of networking, what makes up each one, and then, well, why don't we start? We'll start with that because there's so much meaty content there, and then we'll just run with it from that point.
Sure. So what we know from more than 3 decades of research in the social sciences is for the vast majority of outcomes you care about, right? Whether it's the price you're paying for a good, how successful your business is likely to be in terms of innovation, creativity, sales performance, from your own personal perspective, your likelihood of getting a promotion, your pay, how quickly you find a job, from almost every aspect that most people care about in their professional lives and also in their personal lives. So there's how much emotional support they have. That's determined not necessarily by just the size of your network, but almost all of those outcomes, every single outcome that I just mentioned is actually determined primarily by the type of network you have. And so what we also know based on this research is due to and the natural constraints that we all face, we all have a fixed amount of time, we can't be 2 places at once, that we all have certain network signatures. And as I outlined in my book, Social Chemistry, there are 3 basic network signatures. So I'll walk you through them. And as you're listening to them, you can think about which one applies to me. So the first network signature that we want to think about, or we can think about, are conveners. The defining characteristic of conveners are their friends are friends with one another. So you can think if you were hosting a birthday party for yourself or someone's throwing you a birthday party, would most people at the birthday party already know each other? If they do, then you're likely a convener. Conveners invest a lot in maintaining existing relationships. So they were focused much more on building deeper ties than having a large network. In part, this is due to the fact that they may have lived in the same place for a long time. They may have been at the same job for a long period of time. So part of it's due to circumstance, and some of it's also due to preference. Conveners don't like changing plans at the last minute. And this sort of what we think of as this need for closure is what the psychological term is. That need for stability and preference for stability leads them to develop certain types of networks. The real strength of a convening network is it's imbued with a lot of trust. It has a lot of reputational benefits and a lot of emotional and psychological support. So there's strong benefits to convening networks. The second type of network is a brokerage network. Brokers tend to straddle different social worlds. So they may have had a very unusual career path in which they spend a lot of time in engineering and then moved into sales because they talk to groups that normally wouldn't talk to one another. They are really innovative. They're really creative. They're in the idea import export business. That has a lot of professional benefits, particularly mid-career. In part, if we think about brokers, they actually have the strongest determining characteristic in terms of what we know from personality. Oftentimes people think whether you're an introvert or an extrovert is going to determine what your type of network you have. But actually, the strongest personality predictor is something in psychology that's called high self-monitoring, which is really a chameleon-like effect. So if you are good at making impromptu speeches on things you know nothing about, you're probably a high self-monitor, and that makes it very likely that you're a broker as well, because you're able to talk to groups that normally wouldn't talk to one another. So the benefits of this second network type of brokerage is innovation, creativity. They also tend to have more work-life balance. And the third type of network is expansionists. And expansionists are who we think of as the quintessential networkers. They're great at working a room, and they have outsized networks. So most of us know between 650 and 900 people in our larger acquaintance network. Expansionists know orders of magnitude more, thousands of people. To figure out if you're an expansionist, you can ask yourself, how many people do you know named Emily? And how many people do you know named Adam? In the sense that you could reach out to them without having to Google them, or you've seen them in the past 2 or 3 years. If you know more than 2 Emilys and more than 2 Adams, you're almost certainly an expansionist. And that type of network is really great in terms of visibility, popularity, and influence, and has lots of benefits. In each of these 3 networks types, really, it's important to keep in mind, you can be multiple types. So you could be a broker and an expansionist. And there's no one best or right network. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve in a given moment, the type of business you have, and what your needs are given your personal circumstances.
Marissa, I just knew this interview was going to be jam-packed because you make every word work in your writing, something that we strive to do too. And it comes across in your communication. Like there's no fluff here. I love it. So this has been a meaty episode. Let's finish with one last thing. Sort of, I'm cheating 3 last things. Why don't you give us the number 1 tip for each of the different network signatures? So if somebody's identifying with convener, broker, expansionist, what's the one thing they should be thinking about to take their network to the next level?
I think a tip for everybody to start with is that there's extraordinary value in your existing network. And the key to forming and maintaining a really effective network oftentimes is tapping into your existing network strengths far more than it is to growing your network. So I think there's things that we can learn from each of these 3 network types, regardless of the type of network you identify with or you think you have. There are important things we can learn from each of these 3 types. So let's start with conveners, because that's where we started before. So one of the things that we can learn from conveners is there's great value in reaching out to existing connections and re-tapping into what we call in the literature dormant ties. So people you haven't seen in 2 or 3 years. Work that was done by Keith Levin at Rutgers and his colleagues has found that dormant ties in many ways have the benefits that often arise from both brokers and conveners. If you reach out to someone you haven't seen in 2 or 3 years, they're much more likely than your existing set of contacts to provide you with new information, whether that's new sales leads, more creative ideas, better feedback on existing projects. They're much better at providing new information than your existing ties, but there's already a relationship there. So in many ways, it's easier to pick up. The trust remains. People often are reluctant to do this because they feel like, oh, if I haven't talked to someone in 2 or 3 years, like it's going to be awkward. I promise you, it won't be. Imagine they called you, right? You would be thrilled to hear from them. So we can learn a lot from conveners no matter who we are. Brokers also have a lot to offer in terms of innovation, creativity, new ideas. One of the best ways I think that we can think about what we can learn from brokers is that if you want to change your network, you need to change where you're going. So rather than focusing on who you know, thinking about where you go. And brokers are really a hallmark example of this because they tend to exist in different spaces, and space defines so much of our network. So if you're trying to meet new people or you just need a network refresh, we all tend to move towards groupthink and have less diverse networks than we potentially could. Spend time in a new space, explore a new hobby, learn something new. And by just simply putting yourself in that space, you're likely to regenerate your network, which is something that brokers are really, really great at doing. And then we can think about expansionists. And you've already mentioned this, Mo. Like one of the things that's so powerful about expansionists is they have extraordinarily large networks. But a defining characteristic of why their networks are so large is they actually give in ways that are fundamentally different than other network types. So everyone tends to give. If you look across these types, if you look at who gives to people that they already know or social connections, pretty much everyone does that. But a defining characteristic of expansionists is they give to what I call from one to many. So they're likely to join voluntary associations. They're more likely than other people to donate blood. But they give to the community and they give to a broader public rather than focusing on giving in one-on-one relationships. And that ability to give is really a strength that I think we can all learn from expansionists as well.
Yes, I love it. I can't remember who did the research in the early 70s from, I think it was SUNY Stony Brook, about the value of weak ties. We've been talking a lot about that in the last year because the pandemic has this, we can always reach out to old ties, but I feel like we have a once in a lifetime extra special do-over that it gives you it makes it so easy. Like, hey, I was just thinking of you. I can't go anywhere. I wondered how you're doing. So yeah. I love everything you just said. Well, let me ask this because our folks are going to want to get more of social chemistry and Marissa King. Where should they go? What's the next step they should do?
If you go to assessyournetwork.com, you can figure out what your network type is and get a free network diagnostic that will give you insight into your current network, as well as tips for how to strengthen your network moving forward.
I know people are going to want to do that. Assessyournetwork.com. Thank you, Marissa. Now, folks, if you liked what Marissa's saying, and I know you do, you're going to want to hang around for the next episode. It'll be released tomorrow if you listen to this the day it released, or just go to the next podcast episode. I'm going to ask Marissa, how do we use our networks to create and close more deals, to actually grow our book of business? Now, we're always giving first, but networks have a big impact on how we grow our book of business. So if you're interested in that, I think you are. Watch the next episode. Thank you, Marissa.
My pleasure.
Hey everybody, it's Mo, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. You already know I'm talking with Marissa King. If you didn't catch the last episode where she digs into social chemistry, her amazing book, I really loved it. And she gave us the 3 network signature types to figure out what type of network that you've got. In this episode, so if you haven't listened to that or seen it, go back. It's great. It is a great precursor and pre-work, sort of, if you will, to this one. In this episode, I'm not sure where this is going to go, Marissa, but I just have an inkling that you're going to have something interesting to say. How can our high-end experts, people with one foot in the delivery of complex service, one foot into business development, what do you think they can do to create more opportunities, to close more business, to grow their books of business in a way that feels authentic and is leveraging this idea of a powerful network?
One of the things that's really powerful about networks is we can apply them to our own selves and think about our own networks, but we can also use them to think about our relationships in general. So we can think about that with our relationships with our customers, the relationships that we have with people in our company. And so as you start to think about your own work and what you're trying to achieve, one of the things as we think about growing your book of business that I think is helpful to think about is trying to match this way of network thinking to the type of whatever you're trying to sell or whatever the good or service that you're providing. So if we walk through these types, it also helps illuminate what are some of the drawbacks to different network types and how do you need to be really careful about addressing them. So we can start with conveners again. One of the things that we know from a broad body of research is that if you are working with a product or a service in which the quality is ambiguous, so it's really difficult to ascertain what the true underlying value of that product is, that a convening network is going to be really important because in those convening type networks, there's trust and reputational benefits. So understanding, one of the best things you can do if you have a product in which there's an ambiguous quality is to be embedded in a convening network in which your customers can vouch for you, other people in your network can vouch for you. And so there's a lot of trust and reciprocity, and people are getting repeated exposure to the same information, which increases their ability to believe in what you're doing. And that is really, really critical. And that is in contrast, right? If we think about a different type of way that business deals are often structured, like brokering deals. So imagine that you are in real estate transactions, or you're a headhunter, or your business really depends on keeping people apart or putting them together. So you're straddling 2 different parties. One of the things that we can learn from brokers in this regard is they're often actually at risk for it's called in literature reputational assassination, or they're greeted with suspicion because they're keeping people apart. And to overcome that, one of the biggest things that we know from the research is that the broker themselves has to be perceived as being empathetic. And that ability to be perceived as empathetic overcomes this tendency of people to just be like, I'm not sure, like, are they with us? Are they not with us? And also a key question every broker faces is when to keep people apart and when to bring them together. And so thinking very carefully about the trade-offs between that is really key for anyone who's in a brokering type business. And the final is the thing that we can think about are expansionists, right? So this is if you have a product that either the value is really clear, it's very inexpensive or not costly to experiment so people can easily adopt it. You just need to get it in their hands. Then you can really learn from expansionists. And one of the key things there is thinking about, all right, how do I manage my network, right? How can you truly lead a large network? And there are great examples about how to think about doing this effectively. And the key piece is actually understanding how to do this in a timely manner. So we know actually how frequently you need to be kind of touching people in terms of and being able to keep that network large and growing, but effective in making sure that it's manageable.
This is amazing. And I'm thinking of clients, when I think about broker networks, we've trained the high-end art auctioneers at Sotheby's worldwide. And, they've got a broker network. We think of commercial insurance brokers, healthcare brokers. They have the same idea. So I'm thinking of the different clients we've got in each one. I think of lawyers, very ambiguous product, or service, so that convening network could really make sense. Are these kind of examples resonating?
You nailed it. And your examples are, I think that's helpful is to start to think about where do you fit in these? And the examples you gave are very clear. And there's actually lots of research in each of these categories, right? So we can think about also venture capital, within this, you did the typology very well with the examples you gave based on what we know from research.
Yeah, so let's go deeper then. Awesome. And I'm with empathy, I'm thinking of our clients. So let's say that somebody sort of started to optimize their network in the ways that you just shared. They're really dialing up trust. They're getting really focused on when they should bring people together and when not, if they're a broker, things like that. So let's say there's opportunities in the pipeline. And let's say that, for an example, a lawyer really, really needs to or would really like to bring in a certain matter to their firm, or a broker would really be excited. Their health and group broker at Willis Towers Watson, they'd really like to bring in, to become broker of record with a client. What do people do with their networks to try to actually get the deals done? Is there any advice you have there?
That's a great question. When we've been talking a lot about network structure, right? So thinking about how you can bring deals in or how you can effectively translate and make that move towards closing a deal. But at the end of the day, the ability to do that in the end, it really boils down to trust. And if we think about moving beyond just the structure type of networks, there's also a key part of this is actually the quality of the interactions that you have. And at the end of the day, ultimately, everything boils down to trust. And that really arises for all three of these types in momentary interaction. So how can you create high quality interactions that create enough trust that things are likely to move forward?
I love that. I'm thinking of really practical things like if you're a convener, you might be able to connect a client that's thinking about hiring you with somebody that already does in a way that's helpful for both, but basically creates a, how do you know Jane? Well, she saved the day 3 years ago when we had this contract go south. And, so doing things like that, I feel like building the network's one thing, and then being able to access your network in a way that's mutually beneficial for everybody. People want to help you,
Yes, and that's what I got so excited because that's when I get really excited about networks, right? The power of networks is when you put together individuals and groups, you can get outsized gains. And so by investing in your network and creating value for your network, that comes back multifold to you. And so everything you described is exactly true. And thinking about it from that perspective is so incredibly helpful. And I think that, right, not just for yourself, but everybody in your network and within your community.
Yeah, well, you can see me jump in because I got to ask you one last thing for this episode, and we'll wrap this one up. I'm really excited about your answer here because I feel like sometimes I'm banging just the same drum over and over. So many of our audience, so many people are reluctant to ask for help. They're deeply ingrained service providers. They think all they should do is help the client. They get paid to help, they go on to the next thing. And they don't understand it. So if you get my hint here, I'm looking for some backup, Marissa. I'm looking for some backup. Give me some signs and steps here. They don't understand that when you don't ask somebody for help, you're actually not giving them the opportunity to have that amazing feeling of helpfulness. And by the way, you're probably going to ask people that you've already saved the day for them 50 times. They want to help you. So give me some backup. Tell my people very directly why they should not hesitate to ask for help from their network.
Yeah, I mean, this is really one of the most fundamental principles of how networks work, right? The norm of reciprocity. By asking for help, you're actually strengthening that relationship in a really powerful way. We also know from lots of research in psychology that people like people who ask for help more. So it increases likability, it increases reciprocity. And as you said, right, you in many ways took the words right out of my mouth. Asking for help is really a gift to the other person, particularly in this moment. Asking for help allows the other person to have a sense of mastery. It gives them a sense of, it reinforces their sense of purpose and allows them to get out of themselves. And right, particularly when people have been in social isolation for so long and so focused on themselves, we all want to get out of ourselves. And asking for help allows the other person to do that. So by asking for help, you're actually not only helping yourself, but more importantly, you're helping the other person by allowing them to be of service.
You can see me smiling from ear to ear. I'm going to, when this is done and when we publish in a couple of months, I'm going to send this to thousands of people because they need to hear this, even this ending point. All the other stuff's been awesome, but this ending stuff is so poignant for people because they're limiting themselves by not asking for help over and over. Okay, Marissa, people are going to want more of you. They're going to want more of social chemistry. Where should they go?
You can go to socialchemistry.com to learn about the book and my work.
I love it. Thank you so much. And everybody, if you didn't catch the last episode with all of the stuff that's foundation for this one, go back and watch or listen to that. And in the next episode, I know you think you probably know where I'm going. I'm going to ask Marissa how we can use our networks to deepen relationships. Thank you, Marissa. Hey everybody, it's Mo Buttle, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I have been having a ball interviewing Marissa King, author of Social Chemistry, killer book, total alignment with the snowball system and our Grow Big training if you've gone through that. And in the last couple episodes, we talked about how you can use your networks to drive outsized and magnified results. We've really dug into Marissa's advice on how we can create and close deals. The last episode was awesome. You really need to listen to that and watch it. In this episode, I'm going to ask Marissa this question. Marissa, you ready?
I'm ready.
How can people? No, you're fine. It sounded like I was asking a question, but I really wasn't. Marissa, how can people use their networks to deepen relationships?
I find that networks really are relationships, and the quality of those relationships are actually determined in the moment. So if you want to figure out how to deepen your relationships, we need to figure out sort of what are the keys to this that we know that bring you to the moment. One of the biggest obstacles we know to having effective relationships is actually just simply distraction. So there's a great study that actually was asking people whether we're interested in, for instance, how much do we get distracted? And to do this, they put a clown cycling by on a unicycle. They were curious if people would notice this clown going by, and we think like, of course people would notice a clown on a unicycle. How could you miss it? And they found that more than 2/3 of people who were simply just had their cell phone out didn't even notice a clown moving by on a bicycle. And the point of this example really is to highlight, right, the biggest impediment to high quality relationships is actually distraction, not being able to be present in the moment. So whether that's simply, if you're walking into a meeting, turn your phone off and put it away. We know that even having a phone on a table during a conversation makes that conversation less pleasurable and people perceive it as less empathetic. So that simple action can help enormously. There's another great example along these lines. It's called the parable of the Good Samaritan. So Samaritans at Princeton University were interested in who would stop someone to help someone who was clearly in physical pain on the street. And so to figure this out, they asked Samaritans to either write a sermon on the parable of the Good Samaritan or to write a sermon on something that was totally unrelated to this. And what they found was the key to who would stop and help the person clearly in distress on the ground. It didn't matter, right, which of these sermons that they actually were primed to think about and write about. So essentially how moral that they were primed to be. What mattered for who stopped was whether or not they were told to hurry. And so the key for all of us is to slow down, be present. Even if you have a million things going on, right? I'm around my husband all day long, every day. But we rarely truly connect because we're distracted by other things and we're in a hurry. So that's one key tip. Another key tip is, for me, if I had one superpower for a human connection to give to everybody, it would be listening. And we all think we're great listeners. And if you survey people, 95% of people will tell you they're a great listener. If you've ever been in a conversation, you know that's not true for most people. But even for people who really actively focus on listening, they're oftentimes focusing on active listening. So asking follow-up questions, nodding affirmations. A far better practice to quickly improve your listening is in a conversation, ask someone how they're doing and give them 30 full seconds, just 30 seconds to really talk about how they're doing. And while they're doing that, notice your own tendency. Do you want to jump in with a follow-up question? Do you want to jump in with a Me Too story? And we think that that's helping in conversation. But actually, oftentimes people just need space to be seen and heard. Give them that full space. And it's amazing how quickly relationships can move forward. So those are two pieces that I think are really critical to having high quality relationships.
Marissa, you put a lot of pressure on me because as the interviewer, now I'm thinking, oh man, did I give Marissa enough space? Should I ask a follow-up question? Should I say me too? It's tough. It's tough being in my shoes right now. Let me go with a follow-up question. So if somebody's in that moment and I love the idea of being present. As a side note, I actually started measuring myself this year on a 1 to 5 scale. I just, on Friday afternoon, I think, was I present that week? 5 was really present, 1 wasn't. And 1 week I gave myself a 4, which I beat myself up all weekend about because I don't think I was in the present, but that's something I can control. So you gave the great tip of put your phone aside, things like that. Let's say we're on a Zoom call. Let's say we're in an in-person meeting with a client. We're meeting them for the first time. We feel like we've done the things that you've talked about so far, that we've been present, we put our phone aside, things like that. What else can somebody do, either in that meeting or in the follow-up, to really show that they care, to deepen that relationship, to increase likability and all those kind of things? What's your tip that's a double click off of what you already gave?
Another piece of it, right? I would say the other magic, one of the things that we know is kind of the magic elixir for social connection is self-disclosure. Which is mutual self-disclosure. So allowing people to see pieces of yourself that you feel comfortable with. And that's key, right? Everyone doesn't need to know everything, but allowing people to see aspects of yourself is really important, because at the heart of this, right, it's human connection. And what our goal is to allow us to all see, right? We want to connect on a human to human basis. And so that ability to engage in this process of mutual self-disclosure it's like a trust accelerant. So in those conversations, you're listening, you're present. Allow people now, and once you start talking, right? Once you start talking, allow people to see an aspect of yourself that allows them to really connect with you as a person.
Does that go both ways? Are you looking for those kind of things, like somebody says, we're going on a vacation, and you say, well, gosh, where are you going? And they say, well, we're going to go see the Grand Canyon. You're like, oh my gosh, we've been looking to go there. Or we went last year. Is that the kind of thing that we're looking for or not?
That's part of it. So part of it, right? So part of it is allowing people, right, to identify and see, and you're looking for points of connection. What's really interesting in the literature is actually one of the things that we know is really powerful is not just finding commonalities, right? So surface level commonalities. And we naturally tend to do this because we want to feel safe and comfortable. We look like, are they the same gender as me? Do they go to a similar type of school? But what we know is actually extremely potent is finding uncommon commonalities. So in the experiments, what people look for, right? If you tell people they have the same type of fingerprint, that they like each other more. But if you tell them that type E fingerprints are really rare and that you both have type E fingerprints, people feel a much greater sense of connection. So certainly we're looking for commonalities, but if you can look for uncommon commonalities, so maybe you also like to unicycle, that is a really, really powerful way of connecting that will likely endure for a long period of time.
Yeah, I love it. So asking for more specifics, being more specifics, just mathematically, let's just stumble on those more often. We've even had people that have, instead of just saying, hey, I'm out for the week of whatever, I'm back on this day, and they're out of office email, their autoresponder, they say where they're going. and they found ridiculously crazy uncommon commonalities, or just adding more specifics, asking and adding them more often, I think lets you find those. Thoughts on that before we wrap up this episode?
I love that. I'm going to start saying where I'm going, right, on my auto response, because what you're essentially doing is you're giving people more color and more character. And we all want to know, right, who each other is as humans. And the more you can create more color, more character, and allow people to have a sense of really who you are, then that's where connection happens.
I love it. Perfect. This has been so helpful. Everybody's going to want more of social chemistry and more of your research. Where should they go?
You can go to your local bookshop to find social chemistry.
That's easy. There we go. All right, folks, that's the end of this episode. Check out the next one, because I'm going to ask Marissa how we can hack our own habits, how we can do things ongoing in a way that are going to build our network so we're the most helped, we're the most helpful, we're really optimizing on all things. And it'll probably come down to something we can do ongoing. And I'm going to ask Marissa about that next. Marissa, thanks for being on the show.
It's my pleasure.
Hey everybody, it's Mo. I'm your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I'm really excited to dig into habits with Marissa King, author of Social Chemistry. She's been Marissa, your thoughts have been so powerful on our 3 episodes that we had before this. Folks, if you didn't watch or listen to those, go back. And now I want to dig into what people can do. I want to get hyper practical. You know what our audience is like, folks with 1 foot in the delivery of service, 1 foot in business development. They're super busy. They always say, I don't have much time. So what can they do ongoing to build the most robust networks in a way that they can be helpful, and also obviously in a way that they can be helped over time?
It also comes back to the idea of being really intentional and thoughtful about our networks. For most people, unfortunately, their networks are accidents. They just happen. And despite the fact that our relationships are arguably our most valuable asset, most people aren't taking a conscious inventory and being really thoughtful about making that investment. And what's key, right, is you don't need to be investing a lot of time actually in that. And we know from lots of research that actually spending more time on relationships isn't what's key. In my own research during the pandemic, one of the things I was curious about is what happened in networks. And we found that networks shrunk by close to 16%. Overall, people's networks shrunk by close to 16%. But that was almost entirely due to reduction in the size of men's networks. So men's networks shrunk by close to 30%. Women's networks hardly shrunk at all. And what I bring that up as an example to show is it's not that women were investing more time in their relationships during the pandemic, right? Women, actually, we know from lots of research, have had far less time, but they were investing that time differently. And so whatever amount of time you have, that finding really highlights it's investing it wisely and intentionally that is really key. So my concrete advice is, first off, figure out what type of network you have and what needs that you either can get by reaffirming the strengths of your existing network, or what could you do to develop. There's all sorts of ways of changing your network in terms of changing your behavior in the moment, or thinking about changing the types of connections. Then pick 1 day a week, 15-minute window. And during that 15-minute window, make a list of 3 people that you want to reach out to that can help meet whatever needs you have, and just simply reach out to them. And in reaching out to people, oftentimes there's like, well, what am I going to do, right? So there are a couple of things that you can do. I like to think of it as give, thank, or ask. So first, you can just give them something. It can be something small. Hey, I saw this article. I heard this great podcast. Here, I thought you might like it, and pass it along. Giving is in many ways one of the strongest ways of connecting. Another powerful way is gratitude. Is there a mentor, someone that changed your life or changed the way you thought that you haven't been in touch with for a long time? And simply thank them for what they did. That gratitude is another really powerful way that has mutual benefits of creating connection. And finally, as we've talked about the power of asking for help, but just simply ask for something. You're doing someone else a favor, you're doing a favor for yourself. But 3 people awake, give, thank, or ask.
I love it. You know, it's so funny because all of our readers and Snowball System and people who've gone through Grow Big training, we have a process where once a week, you just pick 3 things that you're going to do that week for your business development. You have some hook on the back end to see if you did it. And generally, they're moving an opportunity forward or moving a relationship forward. What you just gave could drop right down into the relationship component. 15 minutes a week, right? Who doesn't have time for that? But those 3 things a week, 150 or so a year, 1,500 over a decade, really, really outsized results, I would guess. So let's double click on the ask, because our audience, we go into great detail about how to personalize a note, a text, a voicemail, or whatever. That giving part, I think people get the idea. Hey, here's a TED Talk I thought you would like with some personalization. Doesn't look like you're a BCC. That was from me to you, right? Has some personalization. The thank, I think people can get, but the ask is where people have trouble. I know we talked about this 2 episodes ago, but in this 15-minute a week model, how would people ask for something? What might they ask about? Just elaborate a little bit on that one.
I mean, I'm laughing because I have a colleague, Zoe Chance, who's fantastic at this, and she leads her negotiation exercise by asking people like, all right, I have $20. Who wants this $20, right? And people start raising their hands, doing all sorts of things, right? But what she's looking for is simply to say like, hey, can I have the $20, right? Like all you actually really have to do is get the courage to ask, right? People want to help you. So I don't think that's actually some fancy formulated or a complicated thing. I mean, you want to keep the ask small. You want to make it specific so it's easy to answer, right? But the key piece is actually just doing it. And also I think part of it is like, if someone doesn't respond or says no, it's really okay, right? Like I get like anxious, like I probably got red right now just talking about this, right? But like I get a little anxious, but like, so what? Like, it's not a big deal if someone doesn't respond or they say no, right? It's just actually simply putting yourself out there and not worrying about the outcome.
Marissa, I love it. And I think that's exactly right. A quick ask. Can I get 20 minutes for you to review the PowerPoint that we're going to send over to everybody next week? A quick ask to say, hey, we've got a client that would really benefit from talking to you. They're prospective clients. You've gone through the exact same thing that they did before. Would you mind just sitting on a Zoom call for 30 minutes and sharing your story about how you accomplished X, Y, or Z? Because they could really benefit from that. These little asks aren't that much to ask for. A quick note, 100 words or less, really tight. Or even a text to some people, but those little things can be really powerful because it puts you in motion to get to build the network more.
Yeah, and one of my favorite studies actually is a study by Frank Flynn and his colleagues. And what they were interested in is how often people actually say no when someone asks for help. And they did this in all sorts of ways by asking, like, can I borrow your cell phone from a stranger, to asking people to fill out surveys on subway trains. But the key here was they were interested in asking people how often, before they actually made them go out and ask for help, how often people would say no. And people overestimated the extent to which people would say no by magnitudes of order. People were far less likely to say no than anyone would guess, by magnitudes of order. So if the fear is getting in the way, realize that it's probably like you're way more afraid that people are going to say no than they really truly are. We know that from lots of research. And the other piece, and I think this goes for all social connection. Social connection is one of the most curious domains of human life. Like we think we're smarter than average, that we think we're better drivers than average. We generally think we're better than average, but we actually think that we're far worse at connecting with one another. And that's simply not true, right? So if you're struggling with this, if you're afraid, just know that you're better than you think, and people are far more likely to say yes than you think.
Marissa, that's the perfect closing to our 4-part interview. So awesome. So everybody, this is so valuable. It's so densely packed with information. One of my favorite interviews ever. We're going to promote this one like crazy. And if you dropped into this one specifically, go back and listen or watch to the last 3. The one coming next, I'm going to do a recap of at the top 3 things that I learned from reading social chemistry and talking to Marissa, and specifically apply those to business development in our world of high-end experts. So that's coming up next. Marissa, I just can't thank you enough for this. This has been awesome. Where should people go to learn more about you, social chemistry, everything?
You can go to my website, socialchemistry.com, or I'd love to stay connected through LinkedIn.
I love it. And I want to add this one too, folks. She's got a website called assessyournetwork.com where you can go in, take a quick quiz, figure out which of the 3 signatures of networks you are, and that'll give you tons of information about how you implement the great things that Marissa shared with us. Marissa, thanks for being on the show. I absolutely loved it. You got great content, and you're just a joy to be with.
Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Hi, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I'm the author of The Snowball System, and I and my team have trained almost 20,000 experts all over the world on sound, effective, and authentic. That's the most important thing, authentic business development techniques. And I just had an absolute blast interviewing Marissa King, who wrote Social Chemistry. She's a Yale PhD professor. And she's written an amazing, meaty book on how relationships are formed and how networks are built, and specifically what you can do to optimize yours, to help the most and be helped the most. And I absolutely love this book. The alignment is just 100% with what we teach in the Snowball System and in our Grow Big trainings. But the overlap in what we teach is actually quite small. So it's 100% aligned in the same direction, but these are just a perfect pairing of two books and two great pieces of content that you can put together. So in this episode, I'm going to recap the top 3 things that I learned in the prior 4 episodes as we interviewed Marissa. Just had a ball doing that. And I can't wait to share these with you. I'm going to apply these specifically to business development, specifically to you folks in our audience with one foot in the delivery of some expert-driven complex service and one foot into retention and growth, business development. So before we get into the big 3 things, know that if you want our best thinking on how rainmakers think, you can get that in our Grow Big playbook. It's a quick read, gives you the 8 specific ways that rainmakers think differently and how they approach growing their book of business, deepening their relationships, and taking their career to the next level. And the way you get that is you go to growbigplaybook.com. Now that's pretty efficient, don't you think? Grow Big Playbook is at growbigplaybook.com. So head over there and get that, and you get it right away. You get an instant download. It's about an 8-minute read, and it gives you the top 8 things that you should be thinking about. All right, so let's get into Marissa. Not only is she just a dynamic person, but her research and her writing style and the way that she conveys information is really, really powerful. And the 3 things that I got, and I'm mashing up a little bit reading the book with the actual 4 interviews, but we covered such great stuff in the interviews. The 3 big things that I got is the first is knowing your network helps you know what to do next. Now, she talked about the 3 major networks. I won't recap that a ton because I want you to go back and listen to 4 episodes ago. The first one I taped with her, recorded with her. She goes into great detail and you can hear it in her words. But the 3 major types of networks are conveners and brokers and expansionists. And what I thought was really interesting about what she taught us is that if you know which type of network you've built or want to build, then you know what to do to take it to the next level. For instance, the idea that conveners were really focused on bringing people together a lot. Obviously, that's the name. And those are particularly well suited for people that promote or provide some type of roughly ambiguous service. Well, that's a lot of you in this audience. So I was thinking of a high stakes trial lawyer. Well, what you do is very ambiguous. In some cases, you might be working on some board level situation where it is a sort of a bet the entire organization on this particular case. And in other cases, you might work in you might be defending against insurance claims, or there's just a million different things that you could do. And having a network that lets people talk to each other about you across different disciplines could be really powerful because people are able to convey the value you provide in some ways better than you can even provide or convey. So I thought that was interesting. And then when we think about broker relationships, the idea that Marissa gave us, that the key to that is you sort of keep people at bay from meeting each other, because the whole idea is to hire you to bring them together. Executive search is a great example. We work with Sotheby's, the high-end art auctioneers, putting buyers and sellers together for a very high-end, multi-million-dollar pieces of art. Commercial insurance brokers. There's all kinds of different brokers that are out there. And generally speaking, you're in the middle all the time. That's sort of by definition what you do. And Marissa taught us, for folks like that, that really thinking with empathy from all sides and knowing when to bring people together is really key. And then for expansionists, the idea of really, really broad networks, the trick to that is keeping everybody warm, so to speak, throughout your network and trying to find some ways to scale and do it that way. I thought that was interesting. So anyway, the thing that she shared that I thought is really powerful, you can get those 3 models in the book. You can also go to assessyournetwork.com, assessyournetwork.com. And that's, you answer a couple quick questions. There's a video from Marissa at the top of that page that describes the 3 areas. And it'll actually spit out the other end with the type of network that you got. And I think that's super, super helpful because while there's some little tests you can do in the book, this guides you right through it and gives you the answer so you don't have to guess. Especially as I find with me, I'm a hybrid a little bit of all 3. So it was interesting to know how that sorted out. And I got that very practical results from the website where I was guessing a little bit when I went through the book. And the website's free, so why not? So assessyournetwork.com. If you know what you're trying to build or where you're at, you can know what to do. Really, really powerful. The second big thing that I noticed and I really got from Marissa, I've thought about this a lot before, but the way she said it was so interesting, is relationships are formed in moments. We've used the words moments of truth for when somebody comes to you and they need help finding a job, or they need help networking. Their son or daughter is going to graduate from college and they're going to look for in a year and they're looking for an internship. Or there's these times when someone comes to you where the effort that you put forth in those times is multiplicatively more important than other times. You know it when you see it. And that's what we call moments of truth. Those are time when you want to double down. You want to go to the mat working hard for that person. In the job seeking example, when you help somebody find a job, there's clearly no expectation of anything in return, at least in the short term, because you don't know where they're going to wind up. They're certainly not going to buy your services right now unless you help people find jobs. But, helping somebody in a moment like that is the kind of thing that they remember forever. And I've had people tell me in the job search process that people that they thought were really good friends all of a sudden don't return their calls, and people that they barely knew go crazy to help them. And it's in those moments where you want to lock on to those people that have gone crazy to help you, in those sort of moments of truth that you really want to have a long-term relationship. That's when you really find out what kind of relationships you've got in a moments of truth kind of situation. So while we've used that terminology before, I had never thought about Marissa's concept that we're creating our relationships just in moments. Are we paying attention? Are we truly listening? Are we looking for follow-ups? Are we following up when we promise it? Are we doing the things we said we would do? Are we looking, it's cliche, I know, but are we thinking outside the box to help this person? Not in just direct ways we can commercially help them, but are we thinking in the other ways? Are we finding out what they really want and looking for ways to help them in that, regardless of if it positively impacts us or not in the short term? Are we truly trying to help the person as a human being in that moment? And that means listening, being present, looking for ways to help, asking for help potentially, but just having this truly human-based, mutually beneficial relationship. And the tip she gave of just simple things: put your phone aside, pay attention, ask follow-up questions, look for uncommon commonalities. A lot of things you've heard me say dozens of times, but actually doing it is really huge. And I'm so happy this year. If you're a longtime viewer or listener, all the way back to episode 1 when I talked to Kelly O'Hara, defensive star of the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team, football team. We went really deep into how she measures success and then some things I was doing at the time, and specifically focusing on things we can control. So measuring what we call leading indicators, effort. What are the hours I spend in running in different aspects of the business, like business development, platform building, running the business, delivery, things like that. Picking 3 things a week, most important things that we call them, and then being on the hook to do them. They're growth oriented. They're big impact, in our control, and growth oriented. BIG, big impact, in our control, and growth oriented. When we write 3 things a week that we're on the hook to do that are long-term in nature. They have a big impact. We write them so they're in our control. That way we can't let ourselves off the hook. And they're growth-oriented. They're the things that nobody's really asking you to do typically, but they're the things you know you've got to do today so that a year from now you'll be really happy you did it. Things like that are leading indicators. And last year, I think because the pandemic hit, I started tracking some more conceptual things, more broad-based things, and I tracked, am I happy or not? And I just ranked myself on a 1 to 5 scale. When the world locked down, I had a couple 3 weeks out of 5. It's the lowest I've been in a while. And tracking that, was I happy or not, just on a anecdotal, like just thumb to the wind kind of just, how was it? Answer it in 10 seconds, 3 seconds. That 1 to 5 scale really helped me orient around, am I having a good time? Am I doing the things I want? And I can react to it if I just have a weekly trigger to rank myself with these other leading indicators. And I switched that at the beginning of this year because I realized after a year of tracking that, or about a year, that was I happy or not over the course of a week was a bit of a lagging indicator. It helped me think about the next week, but a little bit, but not much. So I changed the definition. So instead of tracking, am I happy, or was I happy in the prior week, I just started tracking, was I present? Well, that's something that's closer to what I can control. Happiness can sort of ebb and flow a little bit. There's a lot of external things happening. Is it going to rain today? Do I have a low pressure headache? Am I sore from a workout? I mean, you can have a million things that happen that are good or bad. But am I present? That was something I could nearly 100% be in control of. When I'm talking to Becky, my wife, am I really listening? Am I locked in? Or am I distracted by sending a text or the news on TV or whatever? And that switch early this year to was I present, that was really helpful. Just a thumb to the wind answer once a week. I put it in a little spreadsheet with the other things I mentioned, the different hours, my MITs, a couple other things, how many miles I ran that week, just running on the roads and trying to exercise. And that one switch to measuring am I present has really made a difference for me. And the way Marissa defined it when we're talking to somebody else was a better definition than I'd ever heard before. So I'm going to carry that through into my spreadsheet. Really excited about that. The last thing, and you've heard me say this before, but the way Marissa said it actually came up in 2 of the episodes, and I love the science that she dropped around it, is we have to ask for help. I want to say it I want to pound my fist on the table, but I won't do it. I can't tell you how many sessions, how many Grow Big trainings we've led in the past several months where, we've trained a couple thousand people just in the last year with our full-fledged comprehensive system called Grow Big, all the stuff that's in Snowball System, but the live, we're going to guide you through it version. And I can't tell you how many deep technical experts, the kind of folks we train, are resistant to ask for help. And I'm at the point where I don't understand it. I used to. But at this point, I've asked for help so much in really authentic, bite-sized chunks from various people. And I think this is actually close to true. I think I get a response 90 or 95% of the time positively. Love to help. When can I do it? Let me know. Maybe that's because we give so much in what we do. But I think more so it's the fact that people love helping. And whenever I bring the concept up in a training class, maybe because people haven't done it before, they're resistant to asking for help. Well, I don't want to put the client out, or that sounds like a lot to ask. I can remember back in my days of being a senior leader at a big consulting firm, and we were so scared to ask for help. And this is 20 years ago, but it was amazing how we just kept going back to the same people to be reference checks for us. I mean, really wearing them out and not broadening the base to other people. And I realize now that was a big mistake. Asking somebody to be a reference, asking somebody to introduce you to somebody else, asking for somebody to review a one-pager for a new offering you're thinking about, asking somebody to review an outreach strategy to a client, asking somebody to review the outline for a webinar you're thinking about doing, asking your clients and our external strategic partners to help us is one of the fastest ways to get great ideas, to enhance our network, and to give somebody the good feeling of feeling helpful. It's one of the, and Marissa quoted it. She's a PhD. She's done some of this research herself. Asking someone for help is one of the most powerful ways to deepen a relationship. And it's helpful for you because you're going to get assistance, because you're going to get help for something. That's the definition. But it actually helps the other person because it gives them the good feeling of helpfulness. And I think as the world gets more complex and more diverse and more digital, I think we're going to run into a glut of not feeling helpful enough, not feeling like we have meaning, things like that. And when we ask somebody for help, they have a feeling of meaning. That feeling of helping someone else is really deep, and it correlates to likability. It correlates to feeling good about yourself, and it obviously correlates to good ideas because you're in progress, because you're asking others for assistance. So those are my big three things from Marissa. I thoroughly enjoyed the interview. She's a gem of a person. You can just see it as she talks, and her content is absolutely amazing. Can't recommend Social Chemistry enough. I really loved it. And if you do want to get that online assessment of your network, of which of the three types you are, convener, broker, or expansionist, you just go to assessyournetwork.com and answer a couple of questions, and out pops the other end what type of a network you've got now. Once you know that, you can move forward. So I hope this was helpful. If you didn't listen to the 4 episodes before with Marissa, I really highly recommend it. They were fantastic. And I really hope all of this content we're providing you helps you take your book of business, your relationships, and your career to the next level. Thanks.